Hello and welcome back to the World League Leaderboard, the podcast where we tell you who's winning and losing in politics each week. This week I'm joined by Zach Michaelis.
Hello.
And Nadja Livadinov.
Hello.
How are you both doing?
Yeah, very well. Well, it's pretty miserable outside, but apart
It's
from that.
pretty miserable outside, both weather and just the world.
The world.
This is how our leaderboard looks right now. This is our ranking of how different politicians are doing based on their own metrics and their own definitions of success. Each week on this show, we move people around, we shift people up on the leaderboard, we shift people down, and we discuss who the true winners and losers in politics are. Let's get straight into it though, and let's talk about the losers this week. Zach, let's start with you. Who is your loser of the week?
My loser of the week is going to be Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Takaichi's called a snap election, I think last week, which is due in the next couple of months. And the polls suggest she's going to win. She is very, very popular, and it's an impressive turnaround given that the person she replaced, so she's the LDP leader. The LDP is that party that's basically ruled Japan consistently since the 1950s. And she replaced Shigeru Ishiba, who, for context, had an approval rating of about -20, right?
Yeah.
But the polling suggests that she has completely reversed that, and she enjoys, very strong approval rating, something more like +40. Some of that is, I think, because on cultural and social issues, she's just more right-wing. She is a sort of often talked about as the protege of Shinzo Abe, who was the LDP leader before, not just Ishiba, but then also Kishida, who was the one before Ishiba. And he was quite right-wing on cultural issues, and she is similarly. She's also enjoyed a bit of a poll boost from the spat with China, which is ongoing. It started after, I think there was a sort of fishing row over two boats that were near the disputed Senkaku Islands, and it sort of escalated into a mini trade war, and neither of them are going to back down. But for all of her political talents, the bond markets really don't like her, and the yield on Japanese government debt has gone parabolic. And this might sound like really, really boring, and in lots of ways it is. And I get that. But Japan obviously has a massive outstanding debt burden, and it has very quickly got to the point where it's very unsustainable. In the past, the Bank of Japan has done a whole lot of stuff to basically facilitate further government borrowing, basically printing money and then giving that to the Japanese government. But it can't really do that because inflation is still, it's higher than the Bank of Japan's 2% target, right? It's sort of like, I think, 2.5%, 3%. But more importantly, it's a massive political issue in Japan, and the further money printing would basically risk pushing back up inflation. And Takaichi has also, in various press conferences, basically just said, I don't really care what the bond markets think. I am going to go ahead with this and spend loads of money. I mean, most importantly, she's planning to cut what's called the sales tax. This was a policy that was very popular with the opposition during Ishiba's tenure. And it would basically, it's like a 20% VAT thing that applies to like food and lots of other consumer items. That would be both inflationary, which the bond markets don't like, but it would also require the government to run a larger deficit. So there's a sort of, they're running headlong into one another, the Japanese government and the bond markets. And it remains to be seen who will win. But it's just very funky, right? Like, Japan has been able to basically print money non-stop for 30 years, and inflation just didn't really move. And I think everyone just sort of accepted that, like, this is just something Japan can do for some weird reason. No one really understood why. But now that inflation is up and Japan does seem caught in a sort of mild wage price spiral, inflation has been persistent since really that price shock in 2022, 23. It's just not really clear what happens now, right? Like, what does that country do with just the most enormous debt burden in the world? And and there is not the political space to like start running a massive surplus that would require massive tax hikes that just would not fly, massive spending cuts that also wouldn't fly. So it just sort of stuck, and I think it's going to be an interesting experiment. But yeah, bad news for her, I think.
Yeah, sounds like it. She's moving down from lightly negative to the fully negative section on the board. How is all of that shaking up when it comes to the election then? Is this like beginning to threaten her chances at the election, the fact that there is this kind of looming economic issue, or are we still expecting a victory for her?
I think we probably should still expect a pretty big victory for her. I think that, well, I mean, it remains to be seen, right? I think people should keep an eye on the polls that will come out in the coming weeks, because obviously this most recent spike in bond yields it's happened in the past couple of days.
Yeah.
So like, there hasn't been enough time for polling to come through on that. And also like, it's not something that you will feel as a sort of, you know, an ordinary Japanese person buying stuff. It's something that will maybe eventually manifest as an acute crisis, presumably once Takaichi takes office, right?
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, right, the campaign has focused more on immigration isn't on the hot topic. Takaichi has promised to tighten up the immigration laws, which were loosened under previous administrations, but have proved politically controversial in Japan and China again, right? And also, like, whatever the sort of costs, the electoral costs involved in an increase in bond yields, it's probably offset by her saying, I'm going to cut sales tax, right? Like, in the round, that's probably a good electoral tactic until it's not. But at the moment, I think it probably is.
Yeah.
So I think she's very, very popular. I think, you know, she is following in Abe's footsteps, and he was very popular. It's just, it's quite a winning formula, being like, on the right of the LDP is like, that is where you want to be as a Japanese politician. That is where you win an election. And that particular faction with the LDP was marred by this scandal a couple of years ago. But the scandal's sort of, it's in the back of people's minds now. People have sort of forgotten about it, and they are just sort of returning to ascendance.
Do you have anything more you want to say about bond markets before I cut you off? I know you do.
I think we've done enough, to be fair.
Really?
Well, I can do if you want.
You've hit your threshold.
The last thing I'll say.
Oh, go on.
The last thing I'll say? Come on,
sure.
Scarlett,
I'm sure it
don't
is.
laugh at me. This has been, I think that would be particularly worrying for Takaichi, is that it's been accompanied by a really steep decline in the yen. It's not what you'd expect to see necessarily, right? You might, when interest rates rise, for instance, bond yields go up, but you also see your currency strengthen. That is not happening at the moment. There is just the fact that both the yen is being sold off and bonds are being sold off at the same time, just reflects the fact that market confidence in Japan is gone. And it leaves them in a real pickle.
Good time to go to Japan, though.
Yeah, it's cheap.
Very
but
cheap.
At the same time, they don't like tourists at the moment. That's another hot issue.
They dislike tourists less than Spanish people do. Like, they're not going to shoot you with a water pistol in
really dangerous territory. Yeah,
come on. The Spanish
I'm not going to
hate tourists. That's their whole thing.
Is that their whole thing?
Yeah, all the time. Do you not aware of this?
No, I'm not really. I know that. I think Lisbon. I heard that they hate
Barcelona
tourists.
also hate tourists.
Is it loads of them?
Yeah.
Fair enough. Anyway, yeah. So
she's a loser.
She's a loser this week. I mean, again, she's really, really popular. Right? I feel a bit bad that she's so far down on the board.
I mean, she'll win an election and come back up eventually.
She'll probably get a little double bump.
But it sounds a little bit like, even if she wins, it's not like she's going to have an easy time. There's a bunch of difficult economic decisions, and like, there's things she can do right now that push those away a bit and kind of appeal to the base. But these sound like kind of longer term issues that might rearise.
I think that's probably a good way of putting it, right? I think that like, it was going to be tough. I mean, it has been tough for her predecessors, right? You're balancing two very different things. You've got a massive debt burden. You've got a very demanding electorate, and actually a very old electorate. Right? That means even more public spending. But at the same time, inflation is back for the first time in 30 years. And that just means that you can't do the things that you used to do, mainly money printing, to get out of it, right? And that's just tough. So yeah, I think structurally she's just not in a great spot. Right? But yeah, I also think the last thing I'll say is that I think the fact that you can really see that they have no good plan, because obviously when this was happening, there was a lot of pressure on the Japanese finance minister to say something, and she just came out and she said, please, can we have some calm? Which it's not like a policy offer. It's
not
just
really.
like, please, can we all chill out?
I mean, difficult to be Japan, because Japan is such a unique and odd economy in so many ways. Yeah. That like, you can't even say, well, this country did it like this, we'll do the same, because
exactly. But that's why I think it's really interesting. Yeah. It's because like, what happens? You know what I mean? What happens now?
No one knows.
No one knows. Probably something bad.
Yeah. Someone should know, really.
Someone should know. To be fair, someone probably does know, but it's not me.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Nadia, let's move on to you. Who is your loser this week?
My loser of the week is the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer.
Oh no.
Yeah, he's going down. I'm doing a Ben. Yeah. He's
already on -4
He's on
the board.
He's our worst performing leader.
By miles. He's moving to a -5 as a result of this.
Turning it down another tier as well.
What's your reasoning?
My reasoning is that he's landed himself in quite some hot water with the US President Donald Trump yesterday and in the last few days, actually. The main reason being is the UK agreeing to basically return the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. So for some context, Chagos Islands are a bunch of around 600 islands that are in the Indian Ocean between Africa and Indonesia. UK claimed them in the 19th century, taking them from France. It was a dependency of Mauritius. And then in the 1970s, in an act of quite brutal colonialism, the British expelled around 2,000 native inhabitants or Chagosians from those islands to build a military base, which they then proceeded to lease to the US. But UK and US both held their military drills there, but it was leased to the US for the next 50 so years. And ever since that, there's been an ongoing legal dispute over the islands. And now it seems that after the international, I'm not sure when this exactly happened, but the International Court of Justice ruled that the islands belong to Mauritius and is under the sovereignty of the Mauritius people. The UK have now decided to give back the islands, so to say, give back. The islands themselves are pretty important. They were used as an important military structural base for the invasions of Afghanistan, Iraq, and more recently the attacks on the Houthis in Yemen and delivering humanitarian aid to Gaza. So they're quite militarily relevant today. And unfortunately, while this is seen probably as a good move in colonial reparations or Great Britain, coming to terms with its own past, it's really not gone down well. Both with people within Starmer's own government who believe that, under this deal, some kind of form of reparations will have to be paid, and that's going out British taxpayers' money. And also, it's just not a great deal for the security of the UK to be giving away military bases in important strategic points in the world. But it's also gone down really badly with Trump, and at a really bad point as well. At a point where Trump is really keen on his whole sovereignty angle and his neo-imperialism and taking control of all these islands, including obviously Greenland. Now that he's heard that the UK decided to give back these islands, which, host the US military base, of course, Trump is really, really not happy with that. And he posted on Twitter yesterday yesterday being Tuesday, saying that it's an act of great stupidity, what the UK has done, what Keir Starmer has done. It's really not good for Starmer because he has been trying since US came into presidency since Trump came into presidency to try and balance those relations and be some kind of US Trump whisperer and manage UK-US relations. But this has just kind of pushed them over the edge a bit. And on top of that, you also got the confirmation of a Chinese super embassy being built in London. And that's not gone down well with the US either. It's seen as a massive security risk. So he's going down essentially for failing to uphold US-UK relations at a pretty important moment.
Okay, so as we've already noted, he is already at the bottom of the board. He's got a -4 next to his name. That increases to a -5 because there is a bottom to the board. He can't go any lower. So we just add little tallies next to them to indicate where they ought to be.
Yeah.
I'm kind of interested, because we're not going to be talking about Trump as a specific movement today. It's a spoiler for you. That there's been obviously a lot of Trump talk, for the last year, but specifically in the last week, it seems that there's been a major escalation in tensions between Trump and basically everyone else.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
I'm so done with it.
And specifically Europe, and specifically with Davos ongoing and kind of the various discussions there. I'm kind of interested both in what we think Starmer's reaction to all of this will be. Does he continue down a similar strategy? But also how we think Europe as a whole is learning from this, because it's not just Starmer who's been stung by this. Starmer certainly set himself up as one of his key selling points was I'm terrible at domestic policy. No one likes me.
Then if he framed it in those terms.
I think he might. But come on. I'm friendly with Trump. People take me seriously on the world stage. Give me a moment.
Yeah.
And clearly this kind of trying to appease Trump strategy is looking less and less viable as time goes on. And honestly, as he tends to kind of dislike and throw more hate towards the people who are nicest to him, or at least attempt to be. So kind of twofold. What do we think Starmer's reaction to this will be? Do we think it will change strategy? And more broadly, the European reaction? And that's kind of posed at both of you.
Can I very quickly say that I do actually feel it's a very rare emotion for me, but I feel bad for Starmer in this particular instance, right? Because it's worth noting that this deal is very controversial with like British right-wingers, right? And I think they've got a point. The ICJ ruling is not binding. So Starmer's just sort of following through because he just bloody loves international law. Even though it's non-binding, we're just going to do it. And Naja mentioned, under the terms of the deal, we are actually paying, I think it's in the
30 billion.
30 billion overall. And that's actually, that's using, I think overall, but that's using a particular way of like calculating on the treasury. And it could, the final number could be a lot bigger, basically, right? That's not accounting for inflation, which we might actually end up having to paying for. It's also worth noting that like this is the Chagos Islands are miles away from Mauritius. They're way close to the Seychelles and the Maldives. And the only reason that they're like considered part of Mauritius is because they were basically, when it was one big colonial territory, they were sort of, for administrative reasons, folded in. That's how the British Empire sort of treated it, right? And it's also finally worth noting that the Chagosians who lived on the island were treated appallingly. And but I think the British government has already paid reparations for it. And they were basically moved there to work on plantations. They were slaves. And some of them were then basically moved to Mauritius. And, from what we know of them, they don't think the Mauritian government have treated them well at all. So they oppose. There's at least some of the sort of like native Chagosians do oppose the deal. Anyway, British right hates this deal. Thought, why would Trump agree to it? But Trump did crucially agree exactly.
To it.
So back in like whatever it was, April, March, there were loads of British right wingers lobbying Trump, being like, "Oh, we can get him to bully Starmer out of this deal. It's a terrible deal." And unlike Starmer somehow convinced him, and both Trump and Rubio quite explicitly said, "Yeah, we like the deal." And there was a strategic rationale for that, right? Like as part of the deal, the US gets a 99-year lease on that base, right? And at least some American policymakers thought, well, the Brits are paying for it anyway, so we don't have to pay anything. But also, it gets basically the Chinese to shut up about like neocolonialism, right? Because the Chinese could justify some of their sort of like pressure campaign against the American base there on the grounds of neocolonialism, being like the ICJ said you have to hand it back, anyway, Trump has apparently completely changed his mind. Maybe it's that he never paid attention to what he was saying in the first place. Or maybe it's, I think probably a bit of both. It's also clearly just a cynical ploy to have a go at Europe over Greenland. So I do feel a bit bad for Starmer, is basically what I want to say there, because, he did somehow convince him that Chagos Island was a good deal. And then Trump, for unknown reasons, has completely changed his mind. But it turns out that convincing Trump and being his friend only matters until you leave the room and then he moves on. Yeah, it's tough. But yeah, I think that, to be honest, I do think that on that, the last thing I'll say is that on that whole Starmer strategy and of appeasing Trump and staying in his good books and all that shenanigans, I think it sort of the optics were good. It looked like they were mates. They seemed to get on. I do think most of it's, by the way, because Trump loves the king. I don't actually think it's much about Starmer. But actually the policy wins very minimal. Right? Like that trade deal, we got a 10% tariff, but that was already that was what it said on Liberation Day. And then we got like a 100,000 car quota. And then the steel and aluminium stuff was supposed to happen, but never did happen. We didn't get any relief on that. So the actual policy wins, I think, have been very, very meager. And it's not really like, Starmer's be able to play his part in talking Trump down over Ukraine a couple of times, but like the Americans aren't supporting Ukraine anymore. He hasn't really won much there. So I always thought the Starmer sell, that he likes to make a lot of the fact that he's the Trump whisperer. I didn't really ever buy it. I think actually, sure, you look like your mates, but you haven't actually got much for the UK here, right? So yeah.
Nadia?
Yeah, also with the whole Starmer presenting himself as Trump whisperer, you've got other European leaders like Maloney who do the exact same thing, but key thing between Starmer and Trump, they have two completely different sets of policies. They're political, they're on the complete, different parts of the political spectrum. And I also just think in general, Starmer's foreign policy track record in the past 2 years or so he does seem more of a follower than an actual leader. I do think sometimes his reactions to big, foreign policy events have been either stalled or he's backtracked, or he's, for instance, like Venezuela, he wouldn't condemn anything, but he had a handful of European countries who, of course, are very cautious of Trump, but were able to say, this isn't right. You can't, attack a sovereign country in this way. So it does kind of feel like he hasn't really been pulling his weight anyways in the past few months. And this, I guess, is just another blow to his international relations reputation.
I think that's a good point about the follower versus leader. I think that's really true, Starmer, right? Like lots of his nominal foreign policy wins, Ukraine. He's just continuing on a Tory policy, right? And doing what all the Europeans are doing.
Yeah.
Although I do think that the only case, I think this is the first time we've seen him. I mean, again, he's sort of following the European mood, but like Starmer actually is coming out quite strong against Trump over the whole Greenland thing.
Yeah.
I think some of it is because he does bloody love international law and like the Greenland thing. I mean, the Venezuela thing, I think his response was basically, let's see what the international lawyers say.
Yeah.
And this one is just so clearly a violation of international law that he's gone, that's out of line, that is.
Yeah.
Which is weird, I think the fact that he really does just love international law just leads him to some weird policy places, right? Like, we'll hand over the Chagos Islands, but we'll fight America to the death over Greenland.
Do we have any polling yet on how this is affecting him in the UK? Obviously, Trump is an unpopular figure in the UK, but it did seem that this kind of strengthened relationship between the two probably helped him in polling. Do we have any data yet to suggest how the public feel about Starmer in this regard yet?
He's just too unpopular. I think it doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
Yeah, but also I think the UK compared to other European countries is not pro-Trump in any way, but like is more softer on Trump.
I think maybe to begin with, but I think the most recent polling suggests that actually we really do hate him now.
Okay.
Most Brits really do hate him.
It took a minute.
And also, another thing, I saw a poll about how many you think we should fight the US and Greenland. We love getting stuck in.
We're up for a scrap.
Yeah, we're up for a scrap. It's a strong majority of Brits think we should fight the US over Greenland.
I mean, yeah.
I'm keen.
Yeah, we'll go.
Go on. Yeah, let's conscript.
Finally, specifically on the kind of broader European point, how do we see Europe playing this whole situation? Are they going to take a similar message from this that Starmer has, or is Macron just going to keep showing up wearing sunglasses and seeing what happens? I bet you love that.
That made me happy. I think I really do think, and again, reading the Brussels tea leaves, so you never know. But I really do think that the Europeans have quite collectively decided that enough is enough, and that this is a bridge too far. I would like to think that this is not because for sort of like colonial reasons. This is not because we really just want to keep our hands on Greenland. I'd like to think it's because they've sort of realized that the appeasement strategy isn't working. And I think this is obviously a more flagrant violation of international law and sort of norms than Trump's previous foreign policy misadventures. But yeah, I do think that the Europeans really have soured. I think the mood has really changed quite dramatically, and I think you see. I think a couple of notable ones: Bart de Wever coming out and saying the appeasement strategy just isn't working. I think when you see smaller European countries who are normally willing to toe the line, getting all uppity about it. I mean, not in a rude way. You know what I mean? As in, like, speaking their mind.
Yeah.
That normally suggests that actually the mood is really hardening. Right? I think you also saw that there was a report, someone should double check it, but that Merz had basically agreed with Macron to use the anti-coercion instrument against Trump.
The bazooka.
The bazooka, the trade bazooka.
It's good branding.
Great branding. It's going to do all, but it's great branding. So I think that, I do think that suggests that the needle really has moved. I do think the Europeans actually are going to stand up to Trump on this one. And in a way, I think the Europeans haven't played a bad hand. We've made a whole lot of concessions. I say we, the Europeans have made a whole load of concessions on like the trade deal, for instance, on Ukraine, right? The Europeans are the ones now paying the money for Ukraine and stuff. But actually, it's sort of been enough to avoid an absolute catastrophe, or to give it it's bought the Europeans some time, right, to take steps towards strategic autonomy, so that if there is now this proper severing in transatlantic relations, at least Europe is slightly better prepared. I think, especially in terms of Ukraine, than it would have been if this happened a year ago, right? Like, when it comes to Ukraine, the French are very proud of the fact that they now do the majority of the intelligence sharing, which was a big thing that we all relied on America for. And they have, the European Union has found a way to finance it with joint debt, right? So actually, if there is just a proper switching off, America just goes, we're not paying any interest in this. You can see a world where the Europeans like hold their own there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think in a way you can argue that they haven't played a bad hand. They've bought enough time, as much time as you plausibly could.
Yeah.
And now they're sort of finally standing their ground.
Nigel?
I mean, yeah, I think with
Sound
I
more
guess
pessimistic.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think, and of course, when the sovereignty of we can call Greenland's European territory technically, right?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
If you're threatening, like, of course, you're going to have to react in that kind of way.
Yeah.
I don't know what other reaction they could have taken that wouldn't have completely just turned things lopsided. I think you kind of have to take that. It's one thing being soft on Venezuela or on Canada or Mexico if their territory is threatened, but when your own territory gets attacked in that way, then you kind of have to take that, put your foot down in that sense. But in terms of like what Zach was talking about with the kind of federalization or strategic autonomy of the bloc, I still think probably got a long way to go. I think even with the whole deciding whether to put troops in Greenland or not, you've got countries like Italy who are very much less keen, and then Germany sending their troops, then sending them back, and then just a lot of, there's not too much cohesion going on at the moment, apart from the obvious blatant, disregard of Trump's comments and saying, no, we will defend whatever, blah, blah, blah. But practically speaking, I think there is still quite some way Europe has to go. But that's just my opinion. I'm more pessimistic.
I think you're right. Like, there's clearly, we clearly don't have a European army yet. Although interesting that the European Commissioner on that is speaking very explicitly about that and saying we need a 100,000 strong European army.
100,000, yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll see. But yeah, so it hasn't fully happened, right? I just think they're in a better place than they were a year ago.
Sure.
Yeah. The other thing I think that I sort of always think about Europe is that like the Europeans are very bad at making big decisions when they don't have to be made. Whereas like when the rubber hits the road, is that kind of phrase? Is that,
I think so. That sounds say? Right. Yeah. Cars, right?
Yeah. That the Europeans will be forced to do the things that they always talk about doing, right? And so I sort of think that I'm not that stressed out about the fact that Europe isn't like a sort of federal superstate yet. Or obviously I'm not in Europe, but I think that the only way that real progress is made on that front is if there just is a severing of transatlantic relations, and then Europe has to respond to that various crises, right? You're never going to get all the things that European federalists dream of if there's always a chance that the Americans will still be there, or that there's no real crisis.
Yeah,
it's only when the crisis actually hits that sort of like change gets made, right?
Yeah,
and so. Yeah, I think in a way you can see the silver lining there, which is that like things are better than they were a year ago. Europe can really hold its own, and moreover, like the fact that there will be a crisis might genuinely force some transformation.
Yeah. Okay. Before we move on to the audience's suggestion, I just want to let you know about a huge sale on our website right now. Wow. Basically, we are in the process of outsourcing all of our logistics. So currently, all of our shipping and everything happens from downstairs in the office.
Which is crazy. People know about this?
Some people know about this.
Some people know about it. We have we spend for like a month, we're just all packing boxes, basically.
That's not true at all. It's like
for probably 2 months.
For probably a morning. A morning each time an issue of Too Long comes out.
And I'm normally working from home.
Very conveniently.
Other people.
Yeah. But we're outsourcing all of that as of next month. And that means that we have to ship this company who are taking it over a whole bunch of stuff. And really, we prefer not to. So if you'd like to lend us a hand and buy some stuff from the store, that would save us a lot of hassle, and we'd really appreciate it. So right now, if you use code FIRESALE, all one word, in the store, you'll get 40% off everything apart from assembly required hardbacks and issues of Too Long. So everything including posters, magnets, notebooks, key rings, all things like that are all 40% off if you use the code FIRESALE. That will only last until we actually ship the stuff to the company, because at that point, not our problem anymore. But we'd really appreciate it genuinely if you'd help us out, because there's a lot of posters in tubes and we just don't want to send them loads of tubes. It's just a real faff. So if you've been considering it, then grab yourself a poster, grab yourself a notebook, grab yourself a calendar. The calendars, I mean, we're pretty deep into January.
Yeah,
but
I'd be amazed if this pitch works.
Still got 11
help us
months.
out, please. There's still loads of months left. Come on.
Like
we barely
11,
started
something?
this year. I know it feels like we should be all the way through the year, but we have barely started
It's
this
mental,
year.
isn't it? Christmas feels ages ago.
I know, and it's like, what,
Yeah.
the 20th? Anyway, code fire sale, 40% everything in the store, very limited time offer. Let's get into it. So every week, we let the audience decide on one person who we will then discuss and then move on the board. This week, the audience chose MBS as the person that we'll be discussing in this section. Zach, do you want to go first? Do you think MBS is a winner or a loser this week?
Oh, I think he's a bit of a massive winner.
A bit of a massive
Bit
winner.
of a massive winner.
Wow. Go on.
This is something that Rory has been covering very, very thoroughly over on TLDR Global. But basically, the story of the past couple of weeks has been Saudi Arabia reasserting its sort of dominance in the Gulf by, as the internal phrase we used over on the main channel, big dogging the UAE.
People love that.
That has mainly taken the form of basically shutting down the UAE's various separatist proxies, right? So the most obvious one has happened in Yemen, where the Southern Transitional Council, or the STC, which is a sort of like the UAE-backed proxy, and they're sort of a separatist group that want to split Yemen into North and South Yemen. They staged this sort of like sudden offensive late last year, right? And everyone was like, oh my God, the UAE, look at them, daring moves, all that sort of thing. And the Saudis responded by orchestrating a couple of strikes and throwing their support behind the main sort of like, essentially like the internationally recognized government in Yemen. And they immediately retook all that territory and forced the STC to disband. I mean, an incredible like sort of turn of events, basically. I also think, and this is a slightly reading the tea leaves, you know, the tea. I love the tea leaves.
Yeah.
But I think that the Saudis have done a very good job in pressuring other countries, including the UAE, not to recognize Somaliland, which was something that the Israelis did last year on like Boxing Day. And there was a very widespread expectation they'd be followed by the UAE, because the UAE have unofficial relations with Somaliland and are very, very close to Israel. And there were even reports that the UAE was sort of shopping around trying to convince other countries to follow suit as well. And they haven't. And I think you can only read that as the Saudis basically saying, don't you dare do this, right? We've had enough of your separatist proxies. And then finally, the Saudis have stepped up their support for the Sudanese army, while the UAE are the big supporters of the Rapid Support Forces, who have been on the front foot throughout. But there have been some signs that the Sudanese army is sort of back on its feet. They re-entered Khartoum a couple of days ago, for instance. So I think that's a pretty big win for him. I think he has won in that sort of not proxy conflict necessarily, but the sort of showdown with the UAE.
Yeah.
I also think that more generally, I think it's pretty incredible that the Saudis have been able to maintain as much regional relevance and heft as they have, given that they're a petrostate in an era of low oil prices and maybe even peak oil, right? And yet they are still very much dominant Gulf power.
Yeah.
And I think some of that reflects some really solid diplomacy, right? Like the Saudis have been able to keep everyone on side.
Yeah.
Most recently, they've sort of moved closer towards the more sort of like explicitly Islamist states in the region. So Turkey and Qatar, they used to have a bit of a tense relationships with Saudis because the Saudis accused them of supporting basically sort of like sort of Islamist upstarts like the Muslim Brotherhood that they saw as destabilizing. And they've mended ties recently. The Saudis and the Turks getting on very, very well. And they obviously, Trump loves him for some reason. I mean, I'm not really sure why. But he's also been able to maintain these sort of relationships with Israel, where Israel is still very, very clearly vying to bring the Saudis into the Abraham Accords, right? Quite desperately so. And yet the Saudis have basically been able to just like still say no, while at the same time pursuing pretty cordial relations with Israel's stated enemies, right? So the Saudis have normalized relations with Iran, for instance, getting close to both Turkey and Qatar, who obviously don't get on well with Israel at the moment. So I just think that it's that they've definitely won in the showdown with the UAE, but I also think it's really quite impressive. Their diplomatic nous is something to behold, right? They have maintained good relations with everyone, and it's sort of a miracle. I think it's quite impressive. I think that the Saudi royal family are clearly quite competent stewards when it comes to foreign policy.
Very comprehensive answer from Zach, suggesting that he is a big old winner.
A big winner.
Nadja, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think Zach's point about the country still being able to maintain social relevance, regional relevance, despite the fact that the economy itself has slightly been struggling with low oil prices and the economy is very dependent on that, says a lot about what Zach was saying with the diplomacy, but also I guess financing and racketeering these different wars that are happening around the region and still having their fingers in each of these conflicts. And obviously that's, if you want to call that diplomacy, that's diplomacy as well, I guess. And they've continued to do so, which is good for MBS. And I think as well what Zach was saying, the ability for Saudi Arabia to say we're not entering the Abraham Accords while still continuing to maintain good relations with Israel, as well as Israel's opponents, enemies, does also say a lot about how big dogs they are in the region. And I'm just repeating Zach's points, but
No.
So winner, MBS.
I do think if you imagine, think about other countries in that region, right?
Yeah.
Like Turkey has some mates and then some
Not so
enemies.
mates.
And it always changes. Whereas the Saudis just seem to keep everyone on side the whole time.
It's pretty crazy.
The Europeans, we even like them at the moment, apparently. There's a lot of talk about a sort of like Gulf EU trade deal, with less talk about human rights abuses, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think that I think he's just doing well by his own lights.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So MBS was the audience's suggestion, and it sounds like pretty big winner. Moving up then from the positive section to the very positive section. Pretty big crew of people up there at the top. Certainly bigger than the very negative section.
So one more win for him.
Oh no, not another one.
His mate Al-Sharaa has consolidated power in Syria. The Kurds, they've been squashed.
It's a shame we've had to separate them on the board.
I know. I feel like I should have moved Al-Sharaa up, really.
Next week, maybe.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Speaking of moving more people up, let's move on to our winners of the week.
So smooth.
Zach, let's start with you. Who is your winner this week?
My winner of the week. And again, definitely not from my personal opinion, but from his perspective.
Nice to get that out ahead of time.
It's going to be Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Okay.
My goodness. Can you imagine how great a time he's having? He has spent the past however many decades trying to break up NATO, and it's happening for him. I mean, it's just, if you were Vladimir...
Nothing to do with him either, really.
Not really. No, it's about Greenland.
Yeah,
And
who would have guessed?
who would have guessed? I hate how much credit he gets as a master strategist, as people know. I was talking about this in the editorial, but he's just a meddler in lots of ways, and he's not even very good at it. But his grand strategic objective is going to be achieved by accident, and that's just great from his perspective. You know? It's also derailed it's happened at perfect time for him, right? Because there was ongoing Ukraine peace negotiations. They were just about coming close to finalizing a deal to offer the Russians. The Russians were going to have to say no, and that was going to obviously irritate everyone. But it's all been totally derailed because NATO is now going to war with itself over Greenland. So, timing's great for him. It's also distracted public attention away from the fact that, Russia's campaign in Ukraine is focused more and more on civilian infrastructure and is doing real appalling humanitarian damage, basically. To Ukrainian cities, which have been cut off from sort of heat, electricity, water. It's bloody freezing in Ukraine as well at the moment. And we're not talking about that. We're talking about, Trump and his Truth Social posts. I just think, from Putin's perspective, that's pretty great. I think that's the main reason he's going up for me, right? I think that NATO is sort of falling apart, and he'll be very, very happy about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Putin's already at the top of the board and already has a +2. So we're adding to that with a +3 today. Interesting, moving the two extremes, Putin and Starmer.
I'll say one other thing. I've just remembered this.
Oh, and there's another thing.
On that, we're talking about this in the editorial, but Lavrov gave an interview to Russian state TV like yesterday.
Yeah.
And he was talking about when he first met Marco Rubio at the start of Trump's first term. And he said, and Marco Rubio was talking to him and saying, we are two great powers and sometimes our interests will diverge, but it's very important that we don't get, too het up about that. We're just great powers. But luckily, sometimes they will converge and we must do the utmost to take advantage of that, right? That sort of explains all Trump's obsession about like an economic deal with Russia or whatever. And it goes back to what really frustrates me is the fact that some people in the Trump administration, including apparently the Secretary of State, treat Russia as if it's a great power. It's not a great power. It's a middle power at best, right? It's just not. And they always speak about it as if it's Russia, America, China, as in these are the three great powers. What a nonsense. What a nonsense. As I said on the editorial, if China has a sphere of influence, it includes Russia. And it's just so frustrating that is apparently.
How do you think they get away with it?
That's got into the Americans' heads. What do you mean? How they project that as the power? When you talked about it, you said that like they do all the meddling, right? They do the messing up with infrastructure projects and cutting undersea cables and all that sort of thing, and that sort of gives them a heft. But anyone could do that. No one else is a dickhead. Like it's not impressive technically or anything like that. It's just being a meddler. I think it's true that Russia it's a big economy and it has more of an industrial heft than most other countries.
Yeah.
But I don't actually think it does very much. How does it get away with it? I think Putin just has a vibe and Trump is bought into that vibe. Yeah. I say this quite a lot, but what annoys me is that I think before Trump, that vibe was really wearing thin. Yeah. Right? I think if you think back to 2023, 2024, Putin was seen in a whole different light. In the 2010s, Putin was really seen by lots of right-wingers as like, the ideal autocrat. You know what I mean? The sort of like, brutal but quiet grip on power and a sort of like technocratic competence and all that sort of thing. And everyone, there's lots of people sort of fantasized about having their own Putin. And that totally fell apart after Ukraine. He looked delusional. He was spouting rabid nonsense about denazification and, the Ukrainian unity with Russia and all this sort of thing. And his army was doing terribly in Ukraine despite this massive modernization program. It's worth noting, I used to follow a lot of Russian accounts to see what the other side was like thinking, right? And quite a lot of them turned on him. Quite a lot of the Russian nationalists really turned on him. They thought, he's just lied about all this. We didn't actually have a great army. We didn't actually have this great economy. Putin was just lying about all of it. He's not actually competent. And I think that was the prevailing sentiment in like 2023, 2024. But then Trump's come back.
Swung back.
Totally sold on it.
Yeah.
Treats him like he's Xi.
Yeah.
And those are not the same, I understand Trump's sort of grudging respect for Xi. I mean, I think it's made for very ineffective policy, but you have to, you can appreciate it. But you shouldn't have that same sentiment towards Putin. He's a pillock.
He's not going to like that. He's not going to come on the podcast next week. Get him lined up.
I mean, to be fair, I think he actually is, I think it's probably true to say that relative to other world leaders, he's quite competent.
But he's still a dickhead.
Well, he's just not that competent.
Oh, I see.
Right?
Okay.
I mean, he's obviously
not competent enough to deserve to be on the pedestal.
Yes, exactly. I think he's a pretty good media performer, but I think, I don't think he's actually a very efficient technocrat at all.
Obviously, the core part of your argument here relies on the kind of ongoing collapse of NATO and the divisions we've already spoken about and the fact that Europe is drifting away and Greenland, and we don't need to retread all of that. But long term, how fundamental do you think all of this conversation we're having is? Do we think that this is genuinely like long-term rift between NATO's kind of, well, I was about to say North American and European, but Canada's with Europe, so America and the rest of NATO? Do you think this is a genuine rift that kind of not only extends into the months ahead, but also into future administrations, and like this truly is a major change? Or is this like a current obsession of Trump? They'll kind of move on from Greenland and the status quo will return.
No, I think it is change.
Are they getting Greenland, do you think?
Well, I think even if whatever happens with Greenland, I think that transatlantic divorce is real.
Yeah.
I think it's real for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, I just think that like we've had 2 Trumps now.
Yeah.
Europeans really have to learn that there will be something will follow Trump. It might be JD Vance, It might be. They're probably not going to be great fans of Europe. That's just not the direction the Republican Party is moving in at the moment. And the Republicans, there's always about 50% chance they're going to win the next election. So like, there you go.
Half the time.
Yeah. You can't rely on America at the moment. The other thing is worth noting is that Biden was obviously a diehard NATO guy, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think the next Democrat will be as committed. But Obama wasn't as committed. Obama wanted to pivot to the Indo-Pacific. They've all wanted to pivot to the Indo-Pacific. The Democrats are mainly worried because, quietly, sure, the Republicans are loud about it, but the Democrats are worried about hegemony. I think that foreign policy wonks in the Democratic Party. I don't think it's unfair to say. I think the median foreign policy dude is predominantly worried about protecting American hegemony against China. That's their main objective. They're not that fussed about Russia.
Yeah.
It's irritating, but they're not that fussed about it. So I do think whoever succeeds Trump, if it's a Democrat, will still want to move away from NATO, and there will still be the familiar questions about like, what sort of Article 5 would the US actually respond to? You know what I mean? Like a couple of troops cross over into Estonia. Is Gavin Newsom going to do that in the middle of a showdown over Taiwan?
Yeah.
Probably not.
I
don't think. So
no, I see that.
I think they will. I also think that actually you're going to have to do, you've still got 3 years of Trump.
Yeah.
You're going to have to do quite a lot in those 3 years. And it's actually going to be more costly to reverse all of that at the next point. I just think we have different priorities, Europe and the US at the moment. And I just think that we should just accept that and get over each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think the divorce is real. I think it leaves a very difficult question for Europe. And I think it's probably always true, but about what relationship it imagines with Russia. I think it's a different question to my mind. The question before was, what is the NATO-Russia relationship? Yeah. Now the question is more about what is the Europe-Russia relationship. And I don't really know if... I think that sort of pushes Europe into taking a softer position in the long term towards Russia. I don't think that Europe would necessarily feel confident taking as confrontational approach against Russia for the longer term as it would do with American backing. You see what I mean a little bit? Yeah. And I think you can imagine in the same way, people forget about this a lot, but before Putin's full-scale invasion, a massive intra-European divide because the Poles, for instance, didn't want to talk to Putin at all, and Macron was constantly doing his thing where he goes to hang out with him and has be these long phone calls. Vladimir, what are you doing? All that sort of thing. And I think that you can imagine something similar happening when the hot war in Ukraine has cooled down a bit.
I'm going to push you on Greenland. By the end of the year, does Trump have Greenland?
I think you can imagine him claiming he has Greenland. Okay. I don't think Trump has Greenland.
Nadja?
No.
By the end of his presidency, by the end of his administration, does he have Greenland?
No.
I think
Same answer?
Or do you think? I don't think so. I think that, but I think he might claim it. I just don't think anyone else will recognize it.
But it would still be administered by Denmark?
Well, that's why I think the whole plan falls apart, right? Because you claim it. What happens to all the 50,000 people in Greenland? It's not very many people, but like, what they need a government. They have a government.
Also, who's even so many levels. Exactly. When you enter the country, who's checking your passport? Yeah. Who's doing it?
Is it just going to be the US military? Is it just going to be soldiers everywhere? They're going to be doing, your GP in Greenland. You're just going to get a Marine.
That'd be crazy.
See what I mean? I just don't think... I think that's where it stumbles, right? They're like, you claim it, but then you have to administer it. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Nadja, who is your winner this week?
Yes. My winner of the week is the Ugandan president, Yoweri Museveni.
Ooh, new addition.
Yeah, new addition. He's going up this week, basically just on the basis that he's won his 7th election. So he's been in power for like 40 years now.
How old is he, do you know?
He's like in his 90s?
How old is he, do you know?
83?
Is he really?
He says he's 83, but that's disputed. That can be easily disputed. So yeah, he's going up for winning the election. Of course, disputed. I'll get to that in a second. But essentially, he won a landslide of 72% against the main opposition, who is a pop star called Bobby Wine from the National Unity Party. It's an interesting story because there has been, of course, a lot of a lot of people saying that the election itself was rigged and a lot of, vote stuffing or irregularities were in place because winning a 72% is winning that kind of majority with the kind of backing that the opposition leader did have. He was really popular, is kind of seen as like, no, that's a bit, sus. But at the same time, sorry, where was I? At the same time, Museveni is, he does have a lot of support by the Ugandan Republic, particularly from the older base of the country. So people who have, been around with him for the past 40 years, who've seen him in his position, that's kind of taking Uganda's economy towards a middle income country. And he has, a lot of plans for like further economic development by 2030 and to start exporting oil. They really see the president, despite the fact him being kind of a semi-dictator or being in the presidency for so long, as the main guy that has the vision for the country and is pushing the country forward. At the same time, you've got the younger population in Uganda who obviously don't have those same kind of emotional sentiments as the older population, and who believe, just because this guy has been doing like an okay job, that doesn't mean people with different ideas shouldn't have a chance to get on the political stage and and have their turn. But at the same time, there's been mass repression of opposition leaders, of political activists, human rights activists in Uganda, which has caused a lot of upheaval and a lot of discontent among young people there. And then just one final thing I'll add is that this is not a story that is isolated to Uganda. It's a story that you can see playing out in a lot of other countries in the region, like Zimbabwe, in which these countries have a really big young population base. Young people make up a big demographic of these countries, and they are slowly pushing against a kind of certain ideologies and certain perspectives that older generations may have, and it's definitely causing a kind of ideological rift between these two demographics. And it's interesting to see what happens. This guy is like 82, 83 now. Yeah. He doesn't have a lot left.
Maybe 100.
Maybe 100. It could be 110. I don't know. What happens when he does finally, leave post forcibly? What happens then in that kind of power vacuum? And, when...
I think he's got a son that he's grooming.
He does have a son that he is grooming. Not in that way. It's ready to be the next, his successor. But he's going up anyways for winning the election and for having, more representation on the board and whatnot. So, yeah.
He did also get away with it.
No
protests.
Yeah.
Used an internet blackout. Autocrats are loving internet blackouts at the moment.
It's pretty powerful.
It does. Why does it work so well?
Because how else do we talk to each other? Yeah. We can't talk to each other in real life.
No carrier pigeons anymore.
Gen Z, they're not doing that.
I think Rory said is he doing an underreported story on like the use of internet blackouts in the next Too Long?
Good pitch.
Good pitch. I didn't even know that. That is good. In the next issue of Too Long, available on the website right now. Okay, so yes, he's being added to the list, added to the board. And because he's a winner, he's being added to the likely positive section. The rules are you're added to either likely positive or likely negative. Winners obviously added to likely positive.
Have you got any stats on the economic stuff? No. No? Okay, nice. We'll cut that bit out.
I can look up really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you. I mean, I just want to know if he's, is the economy actually doing okay? In which case, like, you might have to justify.
They've got the oil export deal with like India or something coming up in a few months' time, and that he's hoping that's going to bring a massive boom. Yeah. So that'd be something to follow.
Yeah, that could be another move up on the board.
Could be. See, do we have Modi on the board? No.
Yes, we do.
We do.
We must do.
Oh yeah, we do. Just not everyone's scared to move.
Yeah.
Where is he?
So I might get the map
He's
wrong.
just on the...
He's lightly down.
Oh yeah, we've not moved him in ages.
Yeah.
I think...
Maybe we will soon.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on finally to our ultimate winners and ultimate losers of the week. Okay, so the way this works is each of us now get to cast a vote for who we think is the ultimate winner and ultimate loser based on the conversations we've had. And if we reach a consensus, then that person moves an additional spot up or down on the board. Considering we started with losers, let's start with our loser options. Your options for ultimate loser are Takaichi or Starmer.
Neither of them feel like massive losers.
Yeah, both of them feel like Yeah, okay. Zach, who is your ultimate loser this week?
I've gone for Big Care.
Yeah.
I just think it's a bit you can't really put Takaichi down again, given that she's genuinely super popular.
Yeah.
Yeah. Starmer. Yeah, because Takaichi's popular and
He isn't.
she's probably going to win
Yeah.
the next election.
I hate to meta game, but I suspected you'd do that. So I went for Takaichi because I thought neither of them deserve it.
That's fair.
To bump Starmer down to -6 on the basis that his friend doesn't like him anymore.
I've
feels
also
a
got to
little
say,
harsh.
I actually think his speech, the one he gave a press conference after Queen and stuff, was surprisingly good. I mean, it's not mind blowing.
No.
I think I don't know if you saw Carney's speech. Did you see Carney's
Yeah.
speech?
No.
Carney's
It was a
speech
banger.
was a bit of a
Good.
banger.
Yeah.
I tell you what, central bankers. I don't want to sound too pro technocrat,
Yeah,
but we
go
should
on.
just let them have it.
Really?
they
Just
can
let the
take-
banks do it all.
Let them just take all the power. Mario Draghi and Mark Carney running the world. And
Crazy.
Jerome Powell. I'd be
Oh,
very
that's
happy
a team.
with that.
That's a good
Yeah.
team.
I'm glad this is buried so deep in the podcast,
No
so it
one's
can't be
listened to it.
controversial.
Yeah.
And your choices for winners are MBS, Putin, and Museveni. Zach, who is your...
I don't have a rubber, so I've gone for Vlad.
Looks like an E in there.
Yeah,
Putin.
I don't know what I did there.
Yeah, crazy.
Not my finest moment.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah,
I've gone for MBS because I think with Putin,
I was tempted.
I think, I was tempted, but at the same time, I just think that even if the whole end of NATO thing, that all makes sense and stuff like that, but if Trump does actually take Greenland, that'll just mean Russia will have to invest more in Arctic security at a time when it really doesn't have the money to do so and is invested in Ukraine. And that's not probably great long term.
Sure.
Also, end of NATO, I'm not 100% convinced that will happen, like the whole transatlantic
Really?
force. I think that one other thing that we didn't talk about is that EU has become now, funnily enough, turning away from Putin's and Russian gas to now being dependent on American
This is
LNG
a very good
energy.
point.
And like them having to do another switch around
Yeah.
of reducing their independence on the US now. I feel like that would just be too complicated.
We're pretty big into Qatari gas as well, so we've got that. But that's a very good point. I
Yeah.
thought about that. That's a very...
I agree with Nadia. I think MBS, you couldn't stop listing reasons he was winning.
Yeah.
And he big dogged him.
I genuinely, guys, I mean, I don't want to get... everyone hates how much I respect the Saudis, but like, I think they are very competent politicians. Incredible. And they're just a royal family. Royal families are normally useless at that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's true.
And they are very competent politicians.
By their own objectives, they're doing very well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's very remarkable.
Okay, so this is how the leaderboard stands at the end of the episode. A fair bit of movement there, although no movement in the final section because we couldn't quite agree on anything. Let's wrap up there and join us again next week for more winners, more losers, and more disagreement. We'll see you then.